Want to make a website? Well, first thing first, you're going to need to get a text editor. You don't want to use anything like TextEdit, Google Docs, or Microsoft Word. These are not for editing text. These are for creating printable documents. So we're just going to fucking close TextEdit, delete that shit. In fact, we should just delete the entire app. What you're going to want is something called Visual Studio Code. Microsoft actually made a good product for once. I'm going to download this. What the hell? Gotta wait for it to download? Fuck that. Well, we got to choose what sort of website we're going to be ripping off today. So let's look up our local chumps and see what their webpage looks like. This webpage looks pretty decent. We're going to have to screenshot to steal this image and maybe take a screenshot to steal this image. And the rest of this, we're probably just going to copy all the text and steal it. Let's open up this text editor and see what this thing looks like. Here's Visual Studio Code. Here's applications. It looks like I already had it installed. And I'm going to open that up. Well, let's see what this thing looks like. Yeah, I'm going to open it. So, this thing is just going to show us raw text, but in all sorts of helpful ways. I'm actually going to go to my desktop and create a new folder, and I'm going to call it My SMC Website. And I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code, and I want to open that folder. Let's see if it'll let me do this. Great. So now I've got a folder over here, and I'm going to make a file. And here's where we make our web page. We always call it something like index.html. This is just the default file name, something is going to try and look up. And I'm going to go back to this web page that we're trying to rip off. And I'm just going to copy all the text. So if we paste all the text in here, this is all the text that's going to display on the web page. We need a way to actually view this. Let's just see what this looks like in our browser right now. So if we open up our website over here, I'm going to right-click, open with Chrome, probably double-click on it. Oh, looks like Chrome wants to access my desktop. All right. So what we can see right now is, for one, this is technically a web page, but there is no organization to it. So what we're looking at today is two parts of web pages, HTML and CSS. HTML is going to define the structure of the website, and CSS is going to define how things appear. So when we look back at this website, we can see there's certain blocks. One thing that web pages kind of call these are divisions. So let's go back to our text and make it look a little bit more structured. One thing that's cool about this visual code tool is we should be able to type in something like HTML, and we get this little pop-up that is going to help us autocomplete certain things. So I'm going to start typing in HTML. I'm going to choose HTML5, the modern version of HTML. And what we see here is it has auto-generated a basic web setup thing for us. So I'm going to go over here. Most of this stuff is not even important. In fact, I'm going to delete some of this crap that I don't really care about. This is kind of the most basic version of a web page. Notice that in here, there's two sections. HTML is all about these tags. So when I say tags, I'm referring to anything with these arrows around them. And there's always an opening tag and always a closing tag. The whole page you'll see is wrapped in an opening HTML tag and a closing HTML tag. And we have two sections. There's the head and the body. The head represents things that we don't see on the page, but that define the page. So here, we have a property in here called title. And I'm going to change that from document to say my SMC web page. And as soon as I save this, if we go back over to my version of this page, notice that the name of the tab has changed. So when we edit that title field in the head section of the web page, it's not something that appears on the web page down here. It actually appears up here. In the head, we could also put other information. Let's see. We still have no real structure to this. So let's see how we can get a little bit more structure. One way to add structure to a page is another tag. So we're in the body now, and I'm going to add a tag called a div. A div just stands for a division of the page, and there's also a tag we could use like a paragraph. These just mean slightly different things. I'm just going to make divs everywhere, and let's see what happens. So even that, let's just refresh this web page and see what's happened. Well, it doesn't look like much, but we can see that the text got broken up a little bit. Why don't I go ahead and I'm going to change some of these to paragraphs. Like this looks like a paragraph. This looks like a paragraph. This looks like a paragraph. The only difference between a paragraph and a div is that a paragraph is going to actually put some new lines between things. But here we go. Now we're starting to see some structure to the page, even doing just this simple stuff. There are... I'm going to show you this. So here I'm actually going to use a paragraph inside of a div. A div is, generally just a useful thing to surround a bunch of stuff. So here I've got a division. So we're going to say this division of the page has a paragraph, and we also have this list of things. HTML includes a bunch of useful tags. Here's a weird looking tag called a UL, which stands for an unordered list. And a UL is supposed to have some things inside of it called list items. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking these things and I am doing a bunch of fancy text editing, but really all that I'm doing is saying that here's an entire list of things with an opening unordered list tag and a closing unordered list tag, and now here is a bunch of list items. So notice again, this is just the same text that we have on the page. All that we're doing is taking HTML and wrapping it around stuff. If we go and refresh this page, we're going to see this is probably going to be a better change. Now we actually have that list of things. Let's do some other interesting things, but meanwhile, we're just going to wrap all this stuff in a div here, just to kind of keep some nice organization. So what we've seen so far is HTML depends on these tags. In fact, I'm going to keep putting each of these things in a div. And just because I think we might want to use CSS later to style these divs, and we'll talk about what that means in a second. Okay. Now what we want to do is get some of these pictures in. So if I open up my File Explorer over here, and I go to my desktop, we've got, I'm going to rename this picture called The Team, and this is called SMC Logo. And if we move those over here, now we have these images available. So in order to display these images, I'm going to make a division up here. I like to put divisions for pretty much any sort of new line item thing. Oh, we see this web page is a little bit fancy because it has that whole menu and it changes when it reacts. We're not going to do any of that. So anytime there's a new section, I'm calling these divisions. So here's an image. It's its own distinct thing. That's a division. Here's a division where we have, this is like a nav bar. Now we have a new section over here, shows this picture. And then we've got, maybe this is all its own division over here. It's like a bunch of paragraphs of text together. In fact, I think that is. I'm gonna change that. So let's go over here, and it looks like this is really one division with a few different paragraphs in it. Oh, this might be another division over here talking about the services, and I like this distinction of like ways to get started. Maybe let's even go down to this hours and make that another division. Once we get into CSS, I'll show you why, what some of the logic is about this whole division stuff. But let's get these images in. So, our page kind of looks the same, but we don't have these fancy images. Well, HTML allows us to put in images using a image tag. And in fact, if I use the Visual Studio Code autocomplete, I'm going to click on this. Maybe I press enter. Oh, come on. Maybe I have to start with IMG. So now it's filling this in for me. An image tag has these things that we haven't seen on another tag yet. These are called attributes. So the tag here is IMG for image, and this is more information that we can provide to the image. So what I'm going to say here is that the source of this image is actually one of these images that's right next to our file over here. I'm going to say smc logo.png. It is important that your images be directly next to the file that you're editing, or else you have to specify, some other direction to it. But it's easiest if you just keep images right next to it. And this alt thing, well, that just means it's sort of for screen readers, or when you hover over text, you can see what the image says. So let's refresh this. There we go. We have a rather large image there. And now I'm just going to put an alt thing here. And I'm going to say our alt text is Seattle Messenger Cooperative logo. So now if I refresh and I hover over this, eventually, I thought it would show me this alt text here. Come on. Well, I'm not sure why it's not doing that. I do know that image has another weird thing where we're supposed to put a slash here. So all these other tags, we have like div, an opening tag, and a closing tag. An image is actually something called a self-closing tag. So I write the image, and I give it the source and the alt, and I would just put this slash at the end of this arrow over here, because an image is like an image itself, unlike a paragraph, which would surround other text or other things on the page. Oh, I'm still seeing if I get any of this alt text. I don't seem to. That's odd. Anyways, we can have the same idea over here. I'm going to copy all this and replace it over here. And we can say this one is actually going to be the team. And now maybe we can change the alt text over here, even though it's not even showing up. SMC team members. And there's our team. These images are really huge. We'll figure out how to deal with that in a second. In fact, just to keep things simple, and because these alt things aren't even do anything, I'm just going to remove this. Okay. I've got the basics of a page. Let's try and use some CSS now. So HTML defines the content of the page, and CSS defines how things look. You can put CSS in another file, but I'm just going to write it in this same page for here for now. And let's start with some basic CSS fundamentals. Here I have a style tag, and this is saying that I want to style the page, and inside that tag I'm going to use a different language. I'm going to use CSS to describe how I want the page to appear. The fundamentals of CSS are you choose a selector, and then you have rules. So here I'm saying that I want the body of this page. In this case, the body of the page is this body element, which wraps literally everything. And I want it to say that the background color is black. So if we go over to our page and refresh this, well, now we have a black background. There is text there. This isn't the most useful thing in the world. And maybe we could say we want the color of the text, color just means text color, to be white. So there we go. Now we've got ourselves like a super goth SMC web page. The image itself has the white background. That's a bit annoying. But here's the basic idea: is you can choose a tag and you give it properties, and it turns out there's a lot of different properties. If you go to W3 Schools, this website is kind of crappy, but it's a pretty good straightforward reference. Here it will show you something about HTML. It'll show you a little bit about CSS. Even just looking over here, here's a few different properties that are available to us. So it looks like we can align stuff in the center. We can do a text alignment. Here they're saying that every paragraph on the page should have this font and it should be this size. So there's all sorts of stuff. If you dig further into it, look at all these things. There's really a lot of different attributes or different CSS rules that you can use. Making corners round on things, adding background images, shadows, text effects. My rule of thumb is keep things extremely simple. So let's make, I'm going to delete those color rules I have for this body. Let's say something about images. So here I'm using the rule, I'm selecting images. I'm using CSS to say that I want every image to have a width of 100%. So if I refresh now, that's the best thing we've done for our page yet, is we've said that every image on this page should be just 100% of whatever it's in. And in this case, it's really inside of the page. Notice on this page, the page itself has sort of a maximum width. The way that we can get something like that is I'm going to wrap everything in a division. And so now we have, we can put divs in other divs. And I'm going to give this thing an attribute, a name, and I'm going to call it container. So in CSS, we don't have to refer to things just by a tag like div or like image or like paragraph. We can give our tags their own names. So here I'm making up this name. In fact, let's call it Jaluso container just to prove that it's something that I'm making. And the way that we can refer to the ID of something is we use a hashtag and we say Jaluso-container. And here I'm going to say that this div itself has its width of 800 pixels. And what we're going to see now on our page is if we refresh this, well, now that container wraps everything in 800 pixels, and we have our own web page like that. There's one difference where on the main SMC page, we see things are centered like this. I happen to know of a trick to get this thing centered. I'm going to say that there's something called a margin. And I'm going to say that the margin, the margin refers to what is on the outside of this thing, space of this and things around it. I'm going to say it has an automatic margin on the left and automatic margin on the right. And that means that when we refresh this, now we get that centered effect. Let's see how to make this thing a bit better. So on the main web page, this looks fancy. It looks like there's a fancy font. Maybe this is an image. I'm not sure what this is made out of, those lines. But let's make this a little bit better. And it even has this hover effect. Well, the first thing I want to do is just make sure this is all centered. So let's do something like this. We have this in a div. And I'm going to give that a name so we can refer just to that. I'm going to call it navbar. So I'm going to come over here and use a hashtag to refer to an ID and call it navbar. And I want this to have a text align center. Again, CSS has all sorts of this different stuff. There's probably a few kind of top 20 commands that are super common and then thousands of others. But things like width, text align, those are pretty common. There we go. Now that is nicely centered. There's some more stuff you want to do for this. In fact, right now, this is all just one big piece of text. What we want to do is split this into different elements so that we can do things like hover over something and get this nice box. So let's see what it takes to do that. Down here, we already saw a list. I'm actually going to reuse this concept of a list. I'm going to say this is just a pretty common way to do nav bars. So here is an unordered list. And I'm going to wrap each of these items in a list item. Sometimes that autocomplete doesn't know what I'm doing. Okay, so now these each have their own list items. Okay, but the way that list items are traditionally made, they go top to down. What do they do? Top to bottom. They're all broken up like this. So I actually want to give some more specific instructions to how that should be displayed. Remember, HTML is all about the content. So here we have a content. It is an ordered list, but now we can use CSS to say that it's displayed a different way. So I want to say that in this div, we have the nav bar, and I want to say that any of the li things inside that nav bar section, so I can select things like this, and I want to say that they should display in a different way, and I'm going to say they should display inline. If I refresh here, now they display like that. Again, this is one of those, oh, you just have to learn all these CSS things, but this is what it looks like. I'm even going to add another thing where I can have a property like this, where I can say if someone is hovering over an li, so I'm saying choose any list item inside that navbar division, and if someone is hovering over it, I'm going to say that the background color of that should be a, oh, how about a light gray? So let's look at this. Now if I hover over something, we get an actual color effect there. I personally don't like how the box is so strictly defined right around the edges of that text. So I can also use another property that I happen to know that exists. Oh, which is padding. I'm using a dimension, not pixels. I'm using a dimension called an M. And 1M is actually equal to 1 width of the letter M. So instead of a pixel measurement, which has to do with your screen, this is actually a font measurement. So the size of this thing would actually scale if you change the size of a font. So let's refresh this. I get the effect here, but this is sort of a classic CSS mistake right here. It only applies that EM when I hover over something, so things kind of shake around. That's kind of nasty. I think I'm going to move this up and say that the padding rule exists for all LIs in navbars, not just when it hovers over them. So let's see what this looks like. Ooh, and maybe just maybe we don't have quite enough room here. I'm just noticing that that last one kind of falls off the edge. So maybe I'll change this and say it's like a 0.2 AM. And there we go. This looks nice. Well, we also want these to actually go somewhere else. So I'll show you how to make some links. Let's say we want people to be able to click on these and actually go somewhere. So I'm going to use a link. These are called anchor tags. This is something that I had a hard time memorizing when I was first learning HTML. I'm going to say that when someone clicks on home, they go to index.html. When someone goes to our team, let's make another page called team.html. Well, the way that you do this is you can actually go over to your files, make a new file, and say team.html. I'm going to copy everything from the home page and paste it over here. And I'm just going to delete most of everything. Come on. I really hate the autocomplete sometimes. Okay, so this is the team page. So let's see what happens here. Now that I've put links, they're displaying this classic blue. So I can click on home, and it takes us to the home page. I click on our team, and notice it says it takes us to the team page. Home, team, home, team. So we could build up different pages for each of these things. And if you ever get super fancy, well, a lot of like modern tools save us from having to copy and paste all that stuff like we did here. Like you can write templates, and then you can just templates for, you know, the main logo and nav bars and things like that. So that really is the basics. Making web pages is all about just having your content, defining how you want your content to appear or how you want it to be structured, and then taking that structure and adding new rules about how you want it to be displayed. And the majority of the game is just figuring out learning more and more CSS rules, and you can look up different tutorials that would just show you how to make all sorts of things. So if you ever wanted, let's go take a look at the free range cycles. I know that Jake and Carol just rebuilt theirs recently. I know that they have some cool stuff down, even down here, like displaying these different images. Well, what this probably is a division with a bunch of image tags, but they must have some CSS or maybe some different HTML that would actually define the grid structure of all this. I'm trying to look for different parts. Let's check out their service page. See, even there, we know that we clicked up here. We've seen how to make a nav bar. Their nav bar is a bit fancier than ours because it's up on top of the page. It's a little bit to the right. They've added different font stylings, but you can see how the structure of this is exactly the same as here. They've got these different divisions. They've got some fancy stuff where this division has like a background image. They've done some more CSS with like alignment to say exactly how these things appear in the middle of the page. Here, you know, we haven't seen anything about how you would create these two different columns of things, but obviously we could, we could probably just go and Google CSS two columns, or we could look at it here. Pretty simple. Right here, this whole div right here is just a big div with maybe some padding on it. It's got a background color. It's got a section of text over here with a different color and a different font. It's got two paragraphs, and over here it's got a button, and actually like a button happens to be like a straight up HTML tag. Oh, what am I looking for? I thought I had seen in their design before they had some text that actually overlays on top of images, but I don't quite see any of that. Let's see. But yeah, that's the basics of it. So here's our little crappy web page. Let's see if we care about doing any of this stuff. No, not really. But yeah, that's about it. All right, get that job.